Yes, I said it. My daughter is usually into Taylor Swift, and
Well, clearly you are too.
I am not. I'm not, but I really fully respect her for what she does because I honestly believe that she's a genius, like a social marketing genius. Like social networking and the whole like 9 yards of social, of Twitter, I think is a lot of wooey. Like it's like there's not much to it. I think that it works for some people. I think it works in our genre. Like it's good for a journalist to be on Twitter, but I think that for most people, Twitter, like there was a person came by, my mother-in-law's a real estate agent, and that woman came by and trying to sell her like on a social networking plan, and that's like, to me, that kind of stuff. There's people getting rich, off of people trying to do that.
Wait, they were selling that door to door like Funk and Wagnalls.
Yeah. Like we'll set you up on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and get you going. And I'm like, you're a word of mouth selling to like usually 65 and older people. They're not going to be on Instagram. It's just like it's just not going to happen.
Well, she apparently her Twitter feed apparently got hacked by some hacker who has something to do with the Middle East.
Well, that's inevitable.
And
she's got more Twitter followers than anybody else, right?
Right, and then I guess they correct the problem, and then she went on Twitter and basically said, people are going to hack, to the whole shake it off thing. So
yeah,
not that I'm.
I mean, I'm not saying that she's not. Like I know her keyboardist really well, and he's a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. I'm not saying anything about her beyond the fact that she's brilliant in terms of this kind of stuff, or has brilliant people working for her.
Yeah,
but
didn't you not appreciate the fact that she pulled off Spotify?
It was a tough one. That was a really tough call because I get it on one hand, and it was a definite statement because she didn't pull off 100 other services like Spotify, like Last FM and all that. So it was definitely just a statement to be made.
Yeah. But is this the equivalent of the Metallica statement with
No. Because the bottom line, what's going on now is there's only in the music business there's only a few people who are even in Taylor Swift's world. There's so few. Everybody else just most people need Spotify to help them.
Yeah, Metallica was antiquated at the time, and that was like a dinosaur approach. It was.
Right, and we saw that didn't work, right? So I mean, most people, like most artists, rely on Spotify. Like I rely on Spotify as a musician too. I tell people to go check out my stuff on Spotify all the time because it's much easier than freaking going and sending them a CD in the mail like we used to have to do or whatever. So yeah, that I don't know.
That's why the post office is going out of business now.
Right.
You're not sending those CDs.
It is my fault.
I have to ask Russ Cohen whether or not Funk and Wagnalls was a Rowan Martin reference.
It wasn't, but I love that show.
Yeah. Because you have to look it up in your Funk and Wagnalls, and I just thought, Russ, you're not quite that old, so.
Listen, I was born in '63. We watched Rowan and Martin. I totally remember that show. It was great.
Come on, let's break out the Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, I still have those in my basement at my parents' house.
I bought a whole set of them with my house. Like there was because they we bought the furniture in the house, and part of that was a whole set of Encyclopedia Britannicas.
I mean, if I remember correctly, Kev, wasn't one of them smoking on the show as they worked?
Oh, for sure, yeah. But that was sock it to me, and the catchphrase was, look that up in your Funk and Wagnalls. That was always that. So, that was like Saturday Night Live before there was Saturday Night Live. That was groundbreaking.
Goldie Hawn was the sock it to me girl, right?
Yep.
Judy Carn, wasn't it?
Yep.
I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about. I'm completely out of the loop on this. What is this exactly?
Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was a variety show.
Laugh-In. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But Judy Carn, who by the way was married to Burt Reynolds for a time, was the girl on Laugh-In. And Goldie Hawn was on that show for a while, wasn't she? Wasn't she part of it?
Yeah, she was. She was for sure.
And let's admit it, she was married to Burt Reynolds at a time that it was friggin' awesomely cool to be married to Burt Reynolds. Like Burt Reynolds.
This was before he hit it big.
Oh, before? Okay, I thought that was
when he was doing Dan August and
it was like pre-Smokey and the Bear. Burt Reynolds.
Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah, this is like
pre-to-pay Burt Reynolds.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's whoa, awesome. All right,
Anyway,
we'll get
enough
started.
memory lane.
I will go off on my people selling social media some other time because it is ridiculous. And if you're out there, if someone comes to your office saying, and unless you're like a podcaster or a blogger, and they come to your office and saying, we can sell you a social media package for $20,000, which is what they're trying to do. Like, just turn them away and say, and use this analogy on them. Say, who got rich during the gold rush back in back in '49 or whenever it happens in California. Who got rich on the gold rush? The people who sold the pickaxes. Those are the people who got rich in the gold rush. So just tell them that the people who are selling social media are people who are selling pickaxes, because no one's social media is not going to help most people most of the time. So unless you're in the entertainment industry, perhaps. But besides that, no.
I'll do it for half price.
I know, seriously. I'll set you up on Instagram. To think like
$10,000, no problem.
Yeah, it was just a few years ago that I was sitting in a restaurant eating my dessert, and I didn't have the desire to send out a bad photo of my dessert to 10,000 people. I didn't need to do that. Now I do. There you go. So there you have it. All right, let's start the show. I have a new watch that tells me the date. I'm really excited about that. So
the correct generation doesn't even wear watches, Zach, just so you know.
That's what I said to him yesterday.
This is a great watch. I love this watch. Look at this. Well, you can't really see, but it's really cool. Big. It's a smart watch. It tells me how many text messages come up on it and stuff like that. Anyway, I like it. Here we go.
Okay.
So it's going to be Michael, then Russ, then Kevin. Throwing a loop there. Kevin, because it just rhythmically works better. I'll explain why later. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, January 28th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.com.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. Coming to you live today from all sorts of areas. And we are the podcast where every day, Monday through Friday, we get together at 1 o'clock to discuss the world of hockey and old sitcoms from the 50s, and to basically try to fill your day with a little bit of joy, so you don't have to be stuck. And you never have to ask yourself the question, am I sick of hockey? Anyway. Russ, have you ever asked yourself that question?
Never.
Oh, come on, admit it.
Never. Even
Kevin?
in the clutch and grab era, never. But I do remember being at some games thinking there was a better way, but I still liked it.
Yeah, I would say this. Prior to the rule reformation of 2005, I had a conversation with David Poyle. This is right when this was going down, and I had said to him that the game was becoming almost unwatchable, almost being the optimum word.
Right.
And he agreed that it was. He said, "Look, it's hard to sit down now and commit yourself to watching those, late games because, if a team got a lead, as we all remember, it was over." You would just start, clutching and grabbing and clogging everything up and obstructing, and there was just no way to get to the net. So I would not say that I've ever been as frustrated that I thought I don't want to be a part of this, but it had reached a point prior to the opening up of the game where it was difficult to find a reason to watch well into the night.
Right.
Yeah. If you could live through the 95 through 04 block of time where the game was challenged offensively and teams were geared towards acquiring big players, and it was more of a it was a defensive game. It was a trap game. Then I think you can survive through anything. I've been a fan since I was 4 years old. I don't foresee myself changing that until I shuffle my mortal coil. So hockey's got me forever.
Yeah. I should bring up, because I've always been fascinated by a conversation I once had with Scotty Bowman about the neutral zone trap. And by the way, once in a conversation with Ron Wilson when he was coaching, before he would answer a question on it, he made me diagram the trap so I understood. So he knew that I understood exactly what it was. But anyway, Scotty Bowman once, and actually did a pretty good job of convincing me that the trap which he really didn't play. He employed the left wing lock, which Barry Smith brought over from Sweden, was really an offensive system and not a defensive system. His argument is that the trap is designed to create turnovers, and that the turnovers is what stimulates the offense. So he argued that the Devils, who beat his team in the finals, basically created all of their offense off that system. So in his mind, he said it was not a defensive system, but an offensive system.
I like that. And you know what?
The Devils would never score like 4 goals, so it's hard.
No, but this is the thing. This goes to my theory, and I talked to somebody about this one time about the Penguins, who when they went to their 2 cup runs versus the Red Wings, were, in my opinion, and I used to argue this all the time, we're a counterattack team. And that was the thing about the Penguins, that people used to say, no, they've got all these stars. They were not. They were not playing a trap, but they were counterattacking, and which is basically, kind of, I think, what Bowman's saying there, that the trap was made. It was a counterattack system. It's essentially.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the problem, and that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about first, which was the Lapierre trade. But what happened to the Penguins is they sort of they got away from. They were really an offensive team in the 1990s, obviously, when they had Mario Lemieux and but they were kind of an Oilers style of offensive team in that they had guys like Ulfie Samuelsson who could play a defensive game. They knew sort of how to keep the score down. I mean, they certainly weren't the Devils, but they had the ability to play. I wouldn't say a defensive style, but they could keep the puck out of their net just enough. But over time, and even after they won the cup, I think they sort of got away from recognizing or acknowledging or paying homage to the idea that the game is different in the postseason.
Right.
And they started being risk takers not only in the regular season, but in my mind in the playoffs as well. I mean, the symbol of the team, prior to winning or post winning that cup was those long stretch passes that they would try to hit Crosby with, which really don't work in the postseason when everybody is sagging, back. So anyway, I bring that all up as kind of the segue to talk about last night's trade, which to me was really fascinating for this reason. I think when a GM gets the job, and I think this is true in all walks of life, you say whatever you need to say to get the job.
Right.
I mean, that's what we all do. You go in for an interview and you try to figure out what it is they want to hear, and you try to say that. And what Jim Rutherford, I'm sure, said is, I agree with the ownership. I'm assuming ownership said this because it was pretty obvious. And what fans are saying is that we've got to remake this team designed for the postseason, particularly in the bottom 2 lines. And we've got to make it grittier, and we got to give it just a little more bite and a little more snarl. We've got to find a winger for Crosby. We've got to address all of these issues, not for the regular season, but for the postseason. But I bring that all up because I think he has just fully embraced that mandate. That he didn't just say it. If you look at all the changes he's made right up to last night, where he brings in Lapierre, who is certainly, in the top 4 or 5 agitators in the game today, a super pest, in my opinion. Now, adding him to Downie, who he's added before, and you look at Como, is third on the team in hits. Spalling, is a role player, a third liner who can slide up and play second, comfortably if he has to. Holmquist, you don't bring him in to be a heavy hitter, but in a tight game, he goes forcibly to the net. He can score tough goals. So my point in all this is I just think that Jim Rutherford has done a really, really solid job of doing what basically his constituents, his fans and his ownership wanted him to do. He has made over this team, and he's made it different. We don't know whether they're going to be successful or not because, for one thing, they're all banged up, and we haven't really seen that team together. But I think if you're a fan in Pittsburgh, you got to be absolutely thrilled with your GM right now because he has done exactly what everybody said he could do. I mean, he has really gone out and change those bottom two lines. He's added a lot of grit, and they got some fire in their belly now. These guys, and
I agree.
He's gotten Perron, and that was a sneaky good acquisition as well, because we all knew that on the skilled end of it, he was going to be a nice fit for Crosby. But I don't think what anybody was concentrating on is that and Kunitz said it when I was in Pittsburgh. He's much feistier than they realized. Because you don't think of him, you just think of his offensive mark. So I'd be interested to get everyone else's opinion. But I think the Rutherford deal last night was a great acquisition. I don't think LaPierre is perfect for every team, and I'm not sure everybody loves the way he plays. But for this team, for what the Penguins are trying to accomplish and what Rutherford's trying to do, I thought that was a great trade.
Well, as you said yesterday, Kevin, the Rutherford has a history of moving early. There were reports yesterday.
That was prophetic. I thought about that last night when this happened. I was like, Kevin just said that Rutherford is an early trader. There you go.
Yeah, and the thing that I'm impressed at the most is in this deal, the cap hits are virtually the same. I think LaPierre is 1.2, Gotch is 1.1. They're both UFAs at the end of the year. So, St. Louis is getting apparently what they want out of, getting rid of LaPierre. I think this is a reaction in a way to the Pittsburgh game in Philadelphia before the All-Star break. You have
I agree with that.
Who's a feisty. Yeah, he's a bigger player. I think he's 6'2", and he doesn't shy away from the rough going. So I think that when it does get rough going in the postseason against a team like Boston or a team like the Rangers or whoever, I think Pittsburgh can stand up to this. But I don't think that Pittsburgh is done making moves, because it was reported yesterday that they put in an inquiry with the Maple Leafs about Daniel Winnick, and the deal didn't work out because the Leafs were looking for something more. But they might be looking for another forward just because of to add depth. To add depth to their special teams, or maybe a third line checker. I wouldn't be surprised if they make another move, because they can. They really didn't affect their ability to make another move because the cap hits were the same in this deal.
Yeah, Russ.
Yeah, I after that game with Philly, Crosby in that locker room basically said, "Hey, we might have lost this game, but we handled it better than we did before, because they didn't fall apart." And I agree with that, but I also think that Rutherford looked at it and said we could do better. But here's the thing. I still think now, while they're making these moves, I saw something in that game that scared me if I was a Penguins fan, and that was Mike Johnston was like a deer in the headlights in the second period while that game was sort of out of control and didn't know how to get his guys under control. And I kind of wonder what he's going to do in the playoffs with these guys, because those games are going to be a lot like what that game was. Just not with all the fights. And
I hate to say it, but I actually agree with you, Russ, on that one. I was really surprised at the way he was reacting to that.
I'm not sure I agree, but I think the comment is fair. Because, he still has much to prove. That's the only issue here, that, even though he has NHL background, not as a head coach in the postseason. You're going up against Claude Julien, who I think is, for example, who is masterful, or you're going up against Lane Vigneault, who's been around the block as well in the postseason. So, he'll have something to prove, in the postseason. You look up and down in the Eastern Conference, depending on how far you go, you're going to have to face some coaches who have been there, done that.
Yeah, I agree that Rutherford's done a phenomenal job, and it's, especially, and it's fun to watch him in this situation, because we've seen him in Carolina, which is just for such a long time, and it's such a different situation for him to be in. And yet he's taking so much. He's coming in like a veteran would, like a veteran NHL player comes in to make the team a certain way. He's doing that. He's a veteran GM, and he's acting like a veteran GM, and he's making moves that are just, these are obvious. To him, this is an obvious thing you have to have, and you need to be able to.
Well, and we hear all the time, GMs, and I know that it's true that it's hard to make a trade, but somehow Jim Rutherford, it's almost like if he was reincarnated, if he had been in the 1800s, he'd have been the guy that would trade you 2 Winchesters, steer for your best horse. He just has this ability. Yeah, he just has this ability to somehow make it all work. Because I'm sure the Blues are pleased with that trade, just like the Nashville Predators. There was no question the Penguins wanted to be away from James Neal as much as they wanted to bring in Hornquist. And
Right.
I don't think that was an indictment. It was just something needed to be done, and he was the likely guy to move. And he had sort of blown up a couple of times on the ice, and it was almost symbolic of the problems, and they needed to make a statement, and he was the guy that should have moved. So, but the point of that obviously is that Nashville is pleased to get him. They haven't had a guy like him. So,
yeah.
if Rutherford can make these trades by giving people away that no longer serve his needs but can serve someone else's, he finds the way to do that. And as you said, it's because he's a veteran general manager.
Yeah, he's a veteran, and I also do agree that this is something to do with like the Downie trade, and because one of the things that Russ and I noted after the Pittsburgh game when we talked to each other about this, I think off the air, was that Penguins relied a lot on Steve Downie, like a lot more heavily on Steve Downie than I would have expected them to. Like he was playing in every situation. And he was on the power play. He was out there. He would slip up to the top lines at times. He would fall back to the third or fourth line, and Downie then Downie gets into a fight there with Luke Schenn in that game, and looked like he shouldn't be fighting people. He's had too many concussions, and to me it was scary. And if they're counting on him that much with his history with his health history, that's a risky move. I think Rutherford saw that too. I think that he says we need somebody else like that.
But guys like Downie and guys like LaPierre are in a way the enforcers of the new generation because they can actually play. I mean, they're not heavyweights, they're middleweights. But they will stick their nose in. They will they'll stir the pot, and that's what you really need. But they can also play an effective third or fourth line role. Can maybe play special teams occasionally. I mean, gone are the days are we going to have Colton Orr or Fraser McLaren? They cannot play more than 3 or 4 minutes, whereas these guys could play double figures in minutes and play an effective role in a playoff scenario.
In the evolutionary chain of hockey, they are the descendants of Sean Avery.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my opinion. They're the ones who that's the guy who started this whole genre sort of, and they're the ones who are continuing it. Russ?
Well, no, and there's another guy too. I was on Sirius the other day at the All-Star game with Matt Barnaby, and I recalled the time that I was covering Barnaby when he was with the Rangers and interviewed him, and he told me he was trying to score 20 goals. And I said, I don't know, what did you end up with that year, 16, 18? And he knew exactly. I think he said 18. And it's just it's the point to make that he did have enough skill that he could do that, yet he was a super pest. And again, I know I brought it up at least once before. Downie was on that 06 World Junior team that won gold for Canada. And we all forget he was on that team, but he was. Now he's not that player anymore, but he does have some of that in him still.
Well, Downie has always been a player who, actually should be better. I think he's had two problems. First of all, he's not really big enough to play the way he plays. And secondly, I don't think he's ever figured out or struck the balance between his aggressiveness and his hockey skill, and how he could utilize both to be an effective player. He's never been able to figure it out, and then he's had health issues. But he's a pretty talented player. I agree with Russ that I thought he was going to have a far greater impact because at the NHL level than he's had. And but I think he's a pretty useful player, and I think in a playoff series over 7 games, I think he's more useful. I think he's when you start to figuring out how you're going to ready for a playoff series and you're going to see him out against you, you're not thrilled at that.
When I first met him, the first time I interviewed him as a rookie in Philly camp, and I realized that he wore hearing aids, and it was an interesting thing because I have some friends who are hard of hearing and have worn hearing aids, and they all sort of there's a tendency towards them to have this little chip on their shoulder about it, and because they always feel like it's almost a paranoia, and they'll admit to it because.
No, it's not the paranoia. I saw it. Guys would mock him behind his back so he couldn't hear him.
Right, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. In his mind, he knows or senses that's happening, but can't prove it or can't tell what's happening necessarily. And that spurs on a certain personality trait that I've seen in friends of mine that I also see in Downie. And there's no question that plays into it as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the talent has never been a question. I mean, when he played with Tampa, I mean, I thought he was a keeper for that team because he played well along with Stamkos. Then he goes to Colorado, and I thought he played. You know, they almost had him at times in a first line role until then he gets moved to Philadelphia and now on to Pittsburgh. So I mean, he's a journeyman, and I don't think it's based on his play on the ice. I don't know what it's based on. I'm not going to speculate, but he has talent, and I think it's a perfect fit in Pittsburgh where he's playing a secondary role, and he accentuates his I guess sort of physical and extracurricular acts to help that team.
Well, I think there's different kinds of journeymen, and I think in his case, he's a journeyman that people have wanted. I think that he's one of those guys that people have gone after because they see this upside. They see it, and I don't think he's necessarily been moved because he was a problem all the time. Like, I think there was maybe a couple instances of that have been the case, but Tampa wanted him. Colorado, wanted him as well. The Flyers wanted him. I mean, even though there were other situations going on there as well. But yeah, I mean, that's just my opinion on the whole thing. I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't get the sense that he's failed in certain situations as much as I know people in Tampa that when he came to Philly said, say hi to him for us. They really missed him. They liked him in Tampa. They thought he was, a really how how's he doing? How are his concussions? Like, people care about this guy. People who play with him, they care about him. There's a sense of that, So to me, I mean, yeah, I think this is the kind of player that Rutherford went after for good reason. I think, Kevin, I think you nailed it. I think he's doing everything he advertised to do, and that is kind of rare, but still, it's encouraging for the Penguins fans at least. But now they still have to get healthy. They have to get it all together, and they have to get.
Yeah, well, and you got to wonder too, because their injuries, like the Dupuis and the Mata injuries, are that's tough sledding. Like, those are two significant players. I think it really has altered what they were going to do on defense. By not having him there. Even if they want to trade Martin, I'm not sure they could do that.
Yeah, they can't.
Not because I mean, everything changes when you're a contending team because it's if anybody's a poker player or plays Texas Hold'em. I mean, what's the mantra? Protect your chips. Well, these GMs, they got to protect their chips. They got to be able to compete for the cup and do the things they want to do. And I think the injuries have really sort of that makes what Rutherford has accomplished to me even more significant because he's not dealing from strength, he's dealing from weakness. Everybody in the league knows he's been overrun by injuries. He's a contending team. You don't really want to help him, and yet somehow he's figured out a way to make this team, hey, I don't know what they're going to do in the postseason, but he's at least accepted what the problem was and has tried to address it, and done a pretty good job in my opinion.
Well, I would love to know what he says to sell Marcel Goc. How he goes about that. Like, I'm not saying anything against Marcel Goc or anything like that, but just thinking about the whole thing, I'm just wondering how he goes about that, because you're right, because we always say people can't make trades, and yet he seems to be able to sell these guys on these guys.
Yeah, and Goc is a good role player. I mean, he like the one thing about the Blues is they didn't really need Lapierre because they have other guys.
Yeah.
And they have big strong guys like Backus, and they've got a gritty team. They're hard to play against.
Yeah.
It's almost like overkill. But Gotch can go in and he could be a penalty killer. He can be a role player, a very steady performer. Yeah. In my mind too, has a pretty good history of opportunistic goal scoring. Like, he doesn't score a ton of goals, but he seems to get them at the right time.
No, he does. He does.
When Gotch has scored some pretty big goals. So
no, that's for sure.
He actually told me he likes to fight too, so you never know. They might be bringing him in just to do that, to take the heat off of some of their better players.
Yeah, and again, I wonder, and I asked this yesterday, and before this deal was even made, whether the sort of tweaking moves, the sellers market will start happening sooner rather than later because there are so many teams out of it in the East, and teams that may want to bottom out. I'm not to say that this was that type of deal, because I think this was sort of a money in, money out type of transaction where both teams benefit, and it was both teams that were contenders. But I have a feeling that once teams see that the market is open, that maybe those deals will start happening 3 or 4 weeks. Now it's 5 weeks right now before the deadline, that they'll start happening maybe next week and leading up to the deadline.
All right, I've got a proposal to help make this trade deadline better, and because I mean, there's a couple things that have gone on in my career of doing rumors, okay, that have really bothered me. All right, one of them was a Kevin Allen thing that I think Kevin actually fixed. I think they finally listened to you when they had the week of talking where you were allowed to talk to players before UFA Day. That was the first person I ever heard propose that was you, Kevin, and that was a wonderful thing that they've done now where you're allowed to talk to players. That I like. The second thing, though, is this. There needs to be a clause that when you trade a player that's going to be an unrestricted free agent, that the cap hit is lessened. This is my theory on this is there's players that are going nowhere, right? These guys who are UFAs who can't play, and if you want to call it the Ray Bork, I've often said call it the Ray Bork, rule or whatever. Like you wanted this player who you want to keep in the NHL, you want to keep playing in the playoffs, but he's older, his cap hit's too high, no one can pick him up, he's going to be a free agent. Why are we just letting him go down on the team, go down, for the rest of the season with a team that's not going anywhere?
Well, that's what cap retention's for, Ak.
It is right. But I'm not totally buying that in a sense. I know that is what it's for, but I think each team should be allowed one player, okay, that they can pick up at the deadline that doesn't affect their cap. That just no. Russ, nope.
Because here's the thing, just like the NBA, you then have to be a good GM and trade my bad contract for your bad contract, or 2 or 3 of those guys, to clear the right space, to make the right move. Like, look at the Mike Richards deal, right? How many teams in the league would just move him off knowing they're going to have to pay the full cap hit? And they're willing to do that because they have such a deep system that they know they can replenish their own players and they don't even care about the cap hit. They wanted him off the roster more than they cared about the cap hit. So that's on the GM, right? So, I mean, you have to just be a good GM.
I don't know. I mean, I agree you have to be a good GM, but what's the harm in this thing? Like, why not? Why don't we want to keep our star players playing?
Well, use Jaromir Jagr as the example. His cap hit's over $5 million. He's a UFA at the end of the year. There's rumors out there about him going to a number of places, Nashville, whatever. If New Jersey wants to move him, if they want to get a return for him, they have the ability, they have the cap space to keep half of that salary to get a future asset. There it is, Zach. I mean, there's cap relief for the team. I mean, that's part of the deal. There's cap relief for the team that is acquiring them, so that they can fit them under their cap, and they give an asset back to get a guy like Jagr. That's how it works. If New Jersey's not willing to eat up $2.5 million of Jagr's salary, then okay, then you can watch him, vegetate after the trade deadline and retire.
Yeah, but before I get Kevin's input,
his prorated salary too.
His prorated salary, yeah. But before you respond, because I really want to hear your opinion on this. This is my last final sell because obviously I haven't convinced either of those two guys. So let's start here. My final sell is this. Okay, we're in the entertainment industry, and how exciting would it be for a 1 week prior to the trade deadline for this to be allowed to happen? You couldn't do this in the beginning of the year. You couldn't do it at it has to be within the trade. So like 1 week now, suddenly every team can pick up one player without a cap ramification.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and the entertainment argument certainly is well crafted. However, the salary cap is in place for a reason, and this is just be cap circumvention, and
it's in place though to keep the cap from escalating, to keep the salaries from escalating. Well, this doesn't cause salaries to escalate because these players are going to be UFAs. They're done.
Well, so you're only saying only for rental players. Well, the problem is not with those players, though. Like, I agree with Mike. I mean, you've got plenty of ways to move a rental player. Like, I've never heard of a rental player that's never been able to move. It's always just the guys like Richards that don't move. Rental players get moved.
They do sometimes, but not always. I mean, I'll have to go back in time because every year I face this. I mean, I know they're players because every year I deal with this same argument comes up. I'm like, why does this player? Because even taking $2.5 million Jagr salary, some teams can't do. Chicago couldn't do that, for example. I mean, Boston couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what you're saying, Eck, is we're giving a get-out-of-jail-free card to teams that can't manage their cap.
For the last 2 months of the season, though, Mike.
No,
I mean,
I'm not talking about. No. Let the GMs do it. Figure out how to trade Yager for 2 other guys whose salaries are more than Yager's, so you can make the deal. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, why should we give the Blackhawks an advantage at the end of the year? Yeah, I mean.
Or the Bruins, they were penalized the $4.5 million for the bonuses on the Iginla contract.
This is why it benefits everyone. Okay, it benefits the Blackhawks. Okay, first off, but let's forget about I'm the last person to want to give the Blackhawks a benefit on anything. So let's take that out of the equation. Okay, it benefits the team trying to move him because suddenly, if Yager can be picked up by 29 other teams, the Devils can get more for him. And there's actually a significant return now for the Devils, and they can make a move, and it benefits the fans because we get to see Yager continuing to play in the NHL season, and it benefits the NHL because we have excitement for the trade deadline.
I'm going to bang my gavel and say the Devils have already made a mockery out of the cap. No.
All right, but they'll take Yager out of the equation. Let's find somebody else. There's plenty of other players like that.
I really don't believe there's been that many players, if any.
I guess my job now is to go back.
Thomas Vanek was moved, Ak. I mean, last year, I know that the Sabres ate $2 million of his salary, but his cap hit with the Islanders was over $5.5 million, and they found a team in Montreal that had the ability to eat that cap space. And remember, the Islanders did not want to trade Vanek to Toronto because Toronto wanted them to eat cap space.
This is a great example. The Anaheim Ducks wanted Thomas Vanek and couldn't, even with the $2 million, make it work. So here's an example of, you can say that Vanek was moved for sure, but what the Islanders could have gotten for Thomas Vanek would have been far greater if they could have opened up other teams. That could have done it.
The Rangers moved Scott Gomez. That was the impossible move.
Yeah. Well, and why? I guess my argument would be the Montreal Canadiens managed their cap under the system, and because of that, they had an advantage. The Ducks played it tighter. That was their choice, and when it came down to it, they didn't have the same advantage. You're
right. That's a good argument. I get that argument. Although I will argue that the excitement of the NHL fans watching management of caps is not nearly the excitement.
Vanek did get traded. Vanek was in the playoffs. He did get traded.
Right. No, he did get traded, but it didn't necessarily benefit the Islanders that much. They got nothing for Vanek, right?
But that's the fault of Charles Wang. If Charles Wang would have been willing to eat $2 million or a prorated amount of $2 million of the salary cap on Vanek's deal at the deadline, he could have gotten a better return than Sebastian Coburg in a third-round pick. It's all on him. It's and Garth Snow takes the heat for that.
But there's no added entertainment value for fans that or reduced entertainment value because he went to Montreal and not Anaheim.
No, sure there is, because if every team out there has a shot at Vanek, that's way more exciting at the trade deadline for everybody.
But most teams did have. There weren't that many teams with not with the Anaheim's cap situation.
Right.
Yeah, here's a bulletin. If you manage your cap better, you have more options at the deadline.
Yeah.
Of course, I get that, but then again, the excitement of cap management, is not that all that thrilling to me.
But more excitement. You want more excitement, Nick?
Yes.
Let all the GMs log in on Twitter, trade deadline day, and let them talk about their trades on Twitter. There you go.
Well, I love that.
Let me get the final word here on that.
Okay.
Let's ask the Pittsburgh Penguins, who were spending $23 million when the Rangers and Red Wings were spending $80 million, whether or not they enjoyed that system better than the one we have now, where everybody's on a cap and everybody's at least in the ballpark in terms of spending and everything else. This is just like racing now, where there are rules in place in NASCAR that cars have to be similar designs and everything else, and there are certain rules that have to be followed, and it makes for better racing. This is a good system. We've got better racing now because of
that's true.
Jim Rutherford's deflating balls.
So
right. No, I think that's there. I mean, that's true. This is all very true, and I don't know. I think that just looking at a pros and cons list to me. I mean, we're not talking about going back to the teams being no player makes more than $7 or $8 million or $10 million in this league. So we're not talking about guys going back to the $50 million discrepancies between teams by picking up one guy for the rest of the season. I mean, to me, that's just all you're doing is giving teams that are out of the playoffs, or giving them a benefit of being able to shop their player better, and you're giving everybody else the benefit of keeping this player in the league. That's where I see it. I mean,
it seems to me Reynolds always get moved, and it's a good. There are enough teams in the mix that generally they do okay. I mean, the Islanders, I thought Mike hit it right on the head. They had an opportunity to get more, and they chose not to take it.
Yeah, no, I will agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about Islanders-Rangers last night, Russ, because that was a good game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good game if you're an Islander fan for sure. They really dominated. I mean, they really took it to the Rangers. Aside from the tic-tac-toe goal, they made guys like Dan Girardi look slow. They made Ryan McDonough look indecisive. Their system of up-tempo hockey and really being able to control the crease and moving the puck from their blue line is really serving them well. But again, I'm going to default to something, too, that a lot of Ranger fans are going to disagree with, and that's, Henrik Lundqvist did not have a great game. Now, the first goal I'm not going to blame on him. The second goal he could have stopped, and I think he could have stopped one of the last two. One of them was a little fluky bounce. If you want to take away, that's fine. But he did not lock that game down. He did in the first period, but I think he tired. I'm just telling you, I don't think he has the same stamina that he used to have. I see this little extra mileage on him, and in games like this, he used to really rise to the occasion. And so far this year, he has not risen to the occasion at all against the Islanders, and that's a bad sign.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, he's just not Lundqvist, right? He's playing well, but he's not Lundqvist. And
right.
What Lundqvist means to the Rangers is enormous, of course. And I think that's a telling sign, especially going to the playoffs. And the Rangers, I mean, Capuano, the Islanders with Capuano, this system that they've been trying to play forever, he finally has the players to play it. It feels like we've been watching the Islanders try to do this.
Yes.
And they haven't been able to. They finally have the horses to do it. And it's amazing that they stuck with this coach as long as they did. I give them all the credit in the world for that, because how many teams would have, really? I mean, this team went. I like Capuano, and but I really questioned many times what the Islanders were doing. Because the players they had just didn't fit into the system.
Well, and Halak's made a big difference too, because the Islanders' goaltending was always just suspect enough for a team like the Rangers to just beat them by force. But, here's a game where most guys had the time off. Now, a guy like Rick Nash didn't, but Rick Nash went into that game, and again, I even talked about this the other day with other writers. We were very happy with what we saw first half out of Rick Nash, but second half Rick Nash is going to matter. And right. So far in that game, he had an open shot in the slot. He hesitated. He couldn't score. He was on the ice for a couple of the goals against. He was sort of standing around and looking. And that doesn't mean he's going to be bad in the playoffs. But to me, it just means this was a game you had to come out and win just for a mental sake. It doesn't mean that much in the standings right now. I don't think that 2 points is going to matter. But the fact that the Islanders know they have this little bit of an upper hand could matter down the road.
Yeah.
Russ, the one thing I'd be concerned about, and you mentioned Lundqvist. I mean, he's only 32 years old, so it's not like he's on the downslope of his career. But he had that slow start last year, right around the time that he signed the extension. But then the second half, he really played great, and then through the playoffs, he's sort of been in that sort of okay, not great through the first half of the season. And I'm not seeing that second half jump that he had last year. I mean, is it the playoff hangover? Is it the fact that they went to the final last year, or is it just he's sort of saving himself for the stretch run in the playoffs?
No, he doesn't save himself. I saw a goal, and I think it was the Tavares goal. Even though it was on the power play, Tavares had about an inch off the post to shoot at over Lundqvist's glove, and he got it. And Lundqvist basically was one-on-one. Lundqvist saw it. It was just him and Tavares scored that goal, and Lundqvist could have stopped it. Now, everybody seems to be doing amazing video work against Lundqvist, against his glove, and I will admit this year Lundqvist's glove does not look great, and that was a play that sort of exemplified that, and it was also a play that sort of exemplified why didn't he hug the post 100%. That's all he had to do on that play, and if you go and look up that goal, or Eck, if you pull it up, you'll say, wow, he should have really stopped that, even though it was a power play goal.
Yeah.
I buy exactly what Russ is saying about Lundqvist. He has certainly not been the goalie this season that he was last season in the playoffs when he was the primary reason why they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. But I think people are putting too much. This is not about what's happening between the Rangers and Islanders. It's more about what's happening with the Islanders and less about what's happening with the Rangers. I mean, the Rangers have played everyone else pretty darn well for a while now. They've played really, really well. But what has happened is that the Islanders have really risen up. I mean, no one wants to accept the fact that this has become a very good team. And what I find fascinating for me, I had a nice discussion with Tavares at the All-Star game, and we were talking about some of the moves that the Islanders made. And I got the sense from my questions and his answers that he is a big believer, I mean a major believer, in Garth Snow. Like, he said to me twice within a short period of time that he likes what the vision that Garth has for this team. And if I'm reading between the lines, the reason it's taken so long in his mind would be Charles Wang. Now, he didn't say that, but I think if he's saying that he loves what the GM has in store for this team and what he's thinking and what he's trying to accomplish, the only reason that it would take so long is that he hasn't had the budget in order to do that. But this Islanders team, as I said yesterday, for all the reasons, Halak, the save percentage is so much better than where the Islanders have been. Like, he's obviously the best guy they've had since a healthy DiPietro. They have the second best offense in the league. The defense is much better than it was. Still not great, but it's improved enough, and it's harder to play against that they can still have hope in the postseason. So, the Rangers, in my mind, I've been impressed with them this season, even though I acknowledge that Lundqvist has not been nearly as good. But in this case, this is really, in my mind, about the Islanders. The Islanders have really become a quality team.
They have, and I don't want to diminish the Islanders, but I think, like, if I look at the Rangers and I say, okay, they've got 58 points, and Washington's got 57. The Rangers won 13 out of 14, and they didn't really distance themselves from anybody. Right. How do you explain that? That is on the Rangers.
Yeah. Well,
why is that on the Rangers?
13 out of 14. That's all you can do. Right?
Yeah. How is that on the Rangers? To me, that's on.
Well, because of their slow start, basically.
Because of the.
Okay. All right. Well, that I would accept, but I think they've played at a high level. The Rangers have, and they're back. Finding their rhythm, and the problem is that the East is better this season than I think we all thought it was going to be. There's no question about that.
And what Glenn Sather is going to have to do, I think, is they still really didn't fully replace all the guys that they lost in free agency last year with Strawman, with Boyle, with Pouliot. And, he has the possibility in the next 5 weeks to go out there and get a couple rent-a-players or a couple players that fit into the scheme of the Rangers and add some bottom six guys who shouldn't be too costly. And if they can do that, then I think they're right there with the Islanders. I think I'd love to see those two teams meet in the first round of the playoffs, because that would be a war.
It will be a war, and I'll tell you one team that's afraid of meeting the Islanders. It's got to be the Penguins, because the Islanders match up very well against the Penguins, in my mind, as far as the styles they play. Let's go to the rumor chart real quick before we get out of here today. I added Mike Santorelli for the first time. I've been trying not to put him on there because I kept being told that he was, a guy that they actually do want to keep moving forward, that they would like to bring, that they would, even though he appears to be a rental. They might not be willing to let him go someplace else and then sign him again in the summer. But I did add him in there. Chris Stewart's name came up a little bit more again. He's not doing himself any favors again by not, he could play a lot better when he's playing. But there are still teams willing to take chances. And then I just heard a lot of talk over the last night. I touched base with a source I haven't talked to in a while up in Montreal, who's basically said, Talusti is the guy that they really like. So.
I can add about Santorelli. It does seem like the Rangers do have interest in him. I don't know what percentage I'd put on it, but they do, and they had a full crew, as Mike told me the other day, watching the Marlies, which made me think that there's a couple of player deal working if they're going to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your sentiment, and I've heard the same thing, that the Leafs do want to sign Santorelli, but the thing is that they feel that there's the price point is going to be close to what Mason Raymond had last year, which would be close to $3 million on a longer term deal, and the Leafs really can't sign players who are sort of, even though he's had a positive effect, even though he's a good workman-like player, versatile forward who can play center and wing, that they can't afford that. So I think if they can get him locked up on a deal, paying him like $2.5 million, they might go there. But he's going to July 1st, and he's coming off a pretty good year. I think that feeds into the likelihood that he's going to be moved. And like I said, I think the Rangers make sense. Calgary a little less so, but possible. St. Louis makes a ton of sense because he can, like I said, he can play a third line position. He can play a second line if needs be. He's a very good player, and the Leafs need draft picks, and I think they would get that for a guy like Santorelli.
Yeah. Any thoughts on any of these, Kev?
Well, I would agree with Santorelli. I mean, the beauty of Santorelli is he's going to be the kind of player that every contender will want.
Yep.
Because he's having a good season and he's a vital role player and he can do a lot of different things, and it won't cost you a first-round pick.
Exactly.
A first-round pick is where everybody draws the line.
Yeah.
They don't like giving up seconds, but they'll do it. But they hate giving up first. So
right.
Santorelli won't command that high a pick, and I think he can probably contribute in health. So I think the Blues and the Penguins, the Rangers, I mean, all those teams make sense.
Yeah. And his salary is $1.5 million, which enables them to be able to fit that. Unlike a guy like Stewart, who's I think his cap hits around 4. Although the Sabres, they don't have any cap retention situations, so they could keep a couple $1 million off of Stewart's salary to make a deal work. And he scored a goal last night, so. If he turns it on over the next couple weeks, Tim Murray may be in a really good position to get something for him.
I still think Stewart is plan B, C, or D for team. I have not heard good things. I've talked to GMs who said they've scouted him and they just don't like how he looks and they're not interested. But we all know that he'll go somewhere, but it'll be for a 5th round pick or something. They're not going to get anything.
Definitely, I agree. And now Tulisti is the final one, and he's, like I said, Montreal name I heard. I've heard the caps continually with Yari Tulisti. It does make some sense. I could see. I still will maintain that he should stay with Carolina. If I was his agent, I would just get him signed there because it's really been a good fit there, and if Carolina is willing to keep him there.
Well, it's not going to happen because he wants too much money. The cost will be too high to sign him.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the worst thing for Carolina in regards to Tulisti was him scoring 23 goals during the lockout shortened season. I mean, he's going to probably want a long-term deal. He's only 26 years old. He's going to want a long-term deal, and he's probably going to want close to $4 million. I wouldn't pay it to him, but I'm sure somebody in the NHL would.
Yep.
Can I add a guy that we haven't talked about to that list?
Yeah.
So last night post-game with the Coyotes, Martin Erat came out and talked, and he scored a goal, and he was really holding back some anger because they had benched him. And he even said, hey, if this team feels like they're better without me, then by all means they should bench me because I want to do what's right for the team. But to me, that sounds like a guy that wants to be traded. And look, I don't think he's a big cog for anybody, but he could be a complimentary player for somebody he's been before.
Yeah, I like Erat. I do. I mean, he gets it's a bad turn of luck that he was traded for Philip Forsberg, right? But he's not a bad player. I mean, Erat's a good player.
He's a skilled player, but he's never lived up to expectation.
Yeah.
Wherever he's been, but he's certainly a talented player. I mean, he's had some really solid stretches, and he's the type of guy that. We all see it in the playoffs. There's some guy that usually steps up and that you weren't counting on, who has some talent, and he could be the guy. I agree with Russ.
That description of him really reminds me of describing every single player on the New Jersey Devils this year. He's shown skill, talents. He at times can be really good. Never quite lived up to expectations. It's just
Sepp Jagr.
Don't worry, the Devils will live up to expectations tonight because Toronto comes to town and everybody seems to live up to expectations when they play the Leafs.
There you go. But we'll see. But I like Erat. Erat's a good call.
I mean, the only thing that mitigates the return for Arizona on that again is salary. He's $4.5 million. Again, if they're willing to, I mean, it's an expiring contract. If they take a little off, they could really probably increase the return that they get for him. I mean, he could be a fit a number of places. So and he does have a lot of skill. So we'll see.
It's worth adding too that even though I don't think the Flyers have any shot at getting back into the playoffs, they have had two very kind of dramatic games in a row now, Russ. Like if you go back, their Pittsburgh win before the All-Star game, and then last night after falling down and getting back and winning in a shootout, they've done some things that they haven't done in a long time. They're
on life support.
They're on life support, and they'd have to go on like a ridiculous run to get back into this thing. They do have the talent to do that kind of a run, but I don't see it happening.
I think they talked about winning like 28 or 35. I think that's what Giroux talked about.
Yeah, that's probably about accurate.
But the one encouraging thing is that Mason did come back last night after Emery got the slow start. Mason did come back, and I thought he looked pretty good. I'm
surprised. But there was a puzzling part about that, and someone brought that up to me. Ed Benkin brought this up to me. He goes, I had heard in practice that he was feeling better, but he didn't feel 100%. And then Ed turned to me and said, well, then if you don't feel 100%, why are you even the backup knowing you have a chance to come in the game?
Right.
And so, like I said, I guess he felt 87%. Like, I don't know what.
That always baffles me with backup goalies. We hear that a lot, like the starting goalie's back in the lineup. He's going to be the backup tonight. Well, wait a second, he's going to be the back. Don't bring him back in the lineup until he can play, I mean, right. Crying out loud.
And the worst possible thing you could do with a goalie that's coming off an injury is put him in cold.
Right. I agree. All right, guys, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Kevin. What do you got going on at the USA Today nowadays?
Well, I wrote the big story on Sidney Crosby that was going to run, but with his injury, we delayed that, so that'll be out next week. And I'm doing a longer piece on, is this going to be the season we're going to see a new, fresh face with the Norris Trophy? I think the answer to that is obviously yes. I think we might see a Shea Weber, or maybe a Giordano. Or even, and I think this is a long shot, but I think he deserves to be in the mix as a Drew Dowdy. So I think this is the year. So that'll be a big piece. I'll probably write that, tomorrow. I talked today about obviously what I just brought up about. I thought Rutherford, that was a great, great trade. And I've got a piece coming out about Verbata joining the Sedins, and he talked about how fascinating that's been when you play with two players who have a sixth sense about where the other is going to be, and somehow you have to merge into that and make it a trio.
Wow, that's good stuff. I think we need a Sidney Crosby show when your article comes out.
I think I had the biggest interview of all, though. I do.
What? Which?
I'm interviewing the Puppy Bowl referee tomorrow.
Awesome.
The Puppy Bowl referee.
I love the Puppy Bowl.
I'm a huge fan of the Puppy Bowl. My family's huge into the Puppy Bowl. It's bigger than the Super Bowl around here.
I know. So this is a big get by me.
Where's the Puppy Bowl held, Russ?
I don't know. It's like at an undisclosed location, and it's actually filmed in August.
It's filmed in August.
Well, it should be.
At the Purina Dog Chow Stadium.
Oh yeah, my gosh, yeah, the Puppy Bowl is a real slice of brilliance by the Animal Planet.
And I'm going to ask the hard questions.
Yes, ask the hard questions. Yes. I know. These kinds of dogs should not be competing with each other. You need more. It's unfair to put certain dogs with other dogs.
I'm going to talk about the ball inflation, what their policy is, all kinds of things.
Right. Yep, for sure.
The team of Irish Wolfhound puppies is sponsored by Jameson.
Yeah, exactly.
The Legion of Boom Boom.
Although I will say that the size of a dog does not dictate its feistiness or ferociousness for sure. And our smaller dog is way smarter and craftier than our big dog here, and our little dog is absolutely gonna would take our big dog down in a heartbeat. So yeah, maybe that's a little bit like quarterback and lineman. That's my thought. Nothing against linemen, of course. All right, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.